Okay, we're in double digits now, day 10 of the shutdown. Lawmakers here in D.C. went home for the weekend for the most part. So where do we stand? What kind of signal do you believe this is sending to legions of people across the country, waiting for Democrats and Republicans to find a way forward?
Well, I think the message is that people have seen this movie before. They've seen it multiple times. They know always how it's going to end, that ultimately the government's going to reopen. They know that during this time, the vast majority of government stays open. And so Americans aren't worried because having seen this movie before, they realize, I think, to a high degree that life goes on with or without a certain portion of the federal government operating.
Okay, but this feature, if you will, this movie has a different opening, threatened to fire some 750,000 workers. Your thoughts on that? Is this just political revenge, or is this more of the Trump administration pushing in for the Doge cuts?
I think it's a little bit of both. No doubt it's political revenge. A lot of it's just political stagecraft and everything. But even there, voters have seen within this movie, they've seen what's happened over the last few months. Uh, Workers are laid off, they're fired, and then the courts step back in and essentially say what's constitutionally true. Congress has power of the purse, the president does not. And so even here, I think people recognize what's the people who are being laid off will probably be brought back soon enough.
Okay, federal workers are now set to miss their first paychecks. For them, it is when this really hits home. And of course, a lot of D.C. has federal workers, but for the most part, these federal workers are spread out across the country. So what do families do, and when will it really start adversely affecting the U.S. economy? Let's say this drags on as long as the previous one did, some 35 days.
Well, let's remember one thing. Government only has money to spend insofar as Americans in the private sector have less money to spend. And so economically, it can't really have any impact. Now, of course, in the near term, in certain areas where there's a lot of federal workers, in theory, there's going to be less spending. But remember two things. Anytime the government reopens, they get back pay. And because they get back pay, it's not unreasonable to speculate that they could go to most any bank and basically be floated on the income that they would have gotten while the government shut down, on the very true assumption that once government is reopened, and eventually it will be reopened probably fairly soon, they'll be paid for the time that they were away.
That is in a perfect world, but the Trump administration has indicated that it says some federal lawmakers shouldn't receive back pay. Do you think, A, this is going to happen that way, and are the courts going to have to weigh in, and does this just make this painful process even more unpleasant?
It certainly makes it more unpleasant, but again, for the same reason that the Trump administration can't levy taxes, for the same reason it can't control spending, it not unrealistically can't say that certain workers are not going to get back pay. The founders were very clear about dividing up power to make sure that no one portion of the three main aspects of the federal government could ever control too much. And certainly presidents don't have power of the purse. And so, again, I think a lot of this is politics. A lot of this is all the things that you'd expect from a politician, but it's not going to go anywhere simply because presidents don't have the power that is assumed in saying that federal workers that come back to work won't get paid back pay.
But let's take this into consideration. Right? We know that consumer confidence is terrible right now. And we heard in Nitza Soledad Perez's excellent story about trying to get federal flood insurance down in Florida right now, that this is going to make people rethink, do I want to buy a home right now? So while, yes, this is going to get worked out at some point, yes, people are going to get paid, it just drives another nail into the coffin in the way the consumer spending is playing out and the U.S. economy, and perhaps trying to find a way to have housing moving forward have a significant uptick.
Well, let's remember two things. For one, housing does not drive economic growth. Housing is an effective economic growth. I mean, think about it. Go to Atherton, California, or Beverly Hills, California, or Houston, Texas. It's not housing driving those three great housing markets. It's technology, entertainment, and oil driving those three markets. So the consumption of housing is in effect. Now, beyond that, what are businesses constantly in search of? They're constantly in search of capital, and to a certain degree, they compete with consumers for it. You can either save your money or you can spend it. And so, if it's true that consumers are going to spend less because they're nervous about the future right now, that money doesn't disappear. No act of saving ever subtracts from consumption. It's just shifted to someone else who has near-term needs for that in the first place, and that very frequently is businesses. And so, economists like to say that consumption drives economic growth, but we know in the real world that investment is what drives it. And so, if people are saving more, that means more investment.
How long before the blame game has a significant impact and we hammer this out?
Again, I think if this were several shutdowns ago, the blame game would have some validity. Look, people are going to take sides. Some people are going to watch Fox and blame the Democrats. Some people are going to watch MSNBC and blame the Republicans. But remember, as I said before, voters have seen this movie before. And so they know invariably what happens. Government is reopened. Everyone gets back pay, so they're not going to worry too much about the government workers. And the third thing they always know is no matter what happens, no matter the party in power, the size and scope of government continues to grow. And so this, as with every other shutdown, to me is much ado about nothing. And again, I think the lack of clamor, the lack of nerves in the electorate over this is an explanation of that. People just aren't worried about this anymore. It's no longer a story. It lacks the political potency that it once had. And as for the economic impact, oh, please, the federal government is an effect of economic activity. It has no resources on its own. In the real world, people will continue doing what they always do.